existed in human society unconnected with religion. It may not suit the campaigner's logic and rhetoric, but untouchability existed in Christianity. In 1300s in Sweden, there was untouchability. In the 1600s up to the French Revolution and a little after, in Spain and in France, there was untouchability. The Cagos of France. There is untouchability in Nigeria because they wanted to keep them so pure, because they are there for devotion of God, that contact with other humans will defile the God, and therefore these people were to live outside the village, and ultimately they became untouchable. Animist Africa has nothing to do with Hinduism. Then there is also the case of Buddhism, which is very strange, that the Buddha who preached ahimsa, this religion, when it found a happier home outside this subcontinent and went to Japan, it made the lives of the butchers and the birds rearers so difficult that they were made untouchables. That was not to do with Hinduism. I think it's important to recognize this is not new information. If you read Ambedkar carefully, he has mentioned the Cagos of Spain and France. As far as changing names is concerned, I can tell you, if you change your name, they will investigate from which name you have changed to this. Caste is not in the name, it's in their minds. Until you address that question, you might want to prefer that my name from today will be AIBPG 54038. That's my PAN card number. That's the only. I think these are superficial things. We are talking about reservation and so on. Are there jobs? What are we talking about? Why get into these fake debates? If there are 100 people in this country, all 100 need jobs, not upper caste or lower caste or discriminated. How do we create a system where the cake is available to all? You can't do it by cutting it finer, you have to increase the size of the cake. Please, this fake debate which is used for political rhetoric should not confuse us. There are no jobs. We have to think of the economy which will make that possible. We have to think of means by which all people in this society will have a place to live in and a job to do so that they can fulfill themselves in their lives. Let us not be diverted by the rhetoric, divisive rhetoric. Also, one last thing I want to say. I'm also a victim of many people attacking me for my supposed caste which my grandfather left. Because they will go and they will identify what your origins are. And you can't avoid it. It's their problem. And you can't really fight it all the time because there are more important things to do. You are 3 examples, and you can give us 100 examples of people, and that's not Ambedkar. That is not K.R. Narayana. The heroes are amongst us. Mr. Chandraya once asked me, why are you celebrating all the top leaders? Are there no achievers at the lower level of society? There are many, many achievers, and they need to be recognized for that, not just the ones who go to the top most. But thank you very much for giving us your insight. We will continue. While Chandraya Garu will give us some more insight into how we are defeated in our common sense. The next session is about fundamentalisms and the fundamentalists. And I would like to invite, immediately after Chandraya Garu finishes, our friends and colleagues Pramod Reddy and Ajay Gandhi. Pramod Reddy and Ajay Gandhi are the 2 voices you hear on the internet and physically about the importance of secularism, humanism, rationalism. This is a voice that is becoming weaker and weaker by the day. So they will be talking about fundamentalisms, not simply in India, but in South Asia. Before that, Chandraya Garu.
Once again, good evening. Friends, I have a small hand key. Right? 1, 2, 3. Come on. is the clap. Please, friends, I want 100 rupee note from anyone. 100. Right. Okay, sir. Thank you, sir. Right. Friends, this is original 100 rupee note. 1, 2, 3, and 4. Okay. 5. So this is the magic. What it is fancy. ఏ బాబా అయినా ఇది చేస్తే ఎల్లారెడ్డి రివీల్ చేస్తాం. బాబా చేయనంత వరకు ఎవరిని కలగానే ఉంచుతాం. థ్యాంక్ యూ.
May I invite Ajay Gandhi and Pramod Reddy, who is being given back his money. Yes. So apart from the question of caste, something that is worrying all of us is the rise of fundamentalism, and I think we will spend the next 30 minutes focusing on those issues. Ajay Gandhi particularly has a lot of experience of dealing with the internet fundamentalists. But over to you.
Probably the concept of fundamentalism is as intractable intellectually and from a practical point of view as caste, or for that matter atheism. So I'll go down to the basics in the sense of how I think fundamentalism ought to be identified. It ought to, I think, be identified as first and foremost an attitude. And that attitude comprises of a few elements. One, the absolute rock solid belief that we, as in this particular group or this particular methodology or this particular area or set of people, possess the truth. That they are the owners of truth in the sense of epistemic knowledge itself. That's one. Second, because they are the owners of this truth, there is only one truth, and that is the one that they possess. Consequently, any other group which professes to possess any other truth is deemed suspect and dangerous, and hence potentially to be attacked. Consequently, the idea there is there's a fundamental breakdown of the notion that all human beings ought to be treated on an equal plane at a fundamental level as an ontological specification. This is how I think we should start looking at what fundamentalism is. Once you take that, then you can start identifying different forms. Religion is that kind of a fundamentalism. Because there's a lot of argument whether Hinduism is a religion. Well, a certain form of Vedic Brahmanism, for instance, would say that the ultimate truth is in the Upanishads and as expounded by Shankaracharya. That's it. Jagam Mithya, Gajam Mithya, Palayana Mithya, that is the ultimate truth. Or those from Islam would think that this truth in this particular book is the only truth, and any other person claiming any other truth is necessarily inimical to my position, and potentially an enemy, and potentially to be suppressed or converted. Same thing again with Christianity. It's pretty easy to define fundamentalism from the perspective of religions. It's quite obvious because the first use of the word fundamentalism itself was done historically in historical scholarship and political activism. But then you can also have political fundamentalisms. Marxism. Marx himself may have been talking about a scientific approach to assessing why a certain form of class structure gets established and why a particular form of economic organization may come into being. But then his followers ended up ossifying it. No new thought was allowed. And Marxism itself turned into potentially a form of fundamentalism. So there are multiple forms of these. Casteism is also, in a sense, a form of fundamentalism, especially in terms of the conflicts between the castes. This notion that there is a superior, and hence that superior has a certain domain which is theirs and theirs alone to determine what ought to be the culture, what is higher and lower, what is pure and impure, who can be seen in the public, whose practices can be shown or not shown in public. Aadite Carnatic music, dance cheste Bharatanatyam cheyali, paadite Carnatic music endukandi? Right? There is a basic tenet of fundamentalism, and that is a lack of openness to new things. And the only way that we can fight this at the level of an attitude is through proper training in science. Science is probably the only approach that necessarily has to ask questions and have always encouraged questions to take it forward. The way you can combat fundamentalism is essentially through a humility in accepting that all truths that we may know are and can only be provisional. Right? I mean, that's fundamentally the theory that animates logic of scientific discovery. And the amazing thing about science is entire paradigm shift. For a period of time, you accept certain things as established facts, but new facts emerge, and the whole paradigm changes. Now, a lot of people turn around. There's a fashionable trend in that it's called postmodernism, where they say, because truth is provisional, there need not necessarily be any truth, and hence there need not be any belief in science. That at a pure metaphysical level of ensuring that scientists remain humble makes sense. But beyond that, I think it fundamentally lapses into a slippery slope. Right? Given that these are the ways we can identify fundamentalism, what have been our problems and what other problems can we expect down in the future? If you people ever get a chance, I think you need to read this person. His name is Manuel Castells. He's a sociologist from Berkeley. Possibly one of the most underrated big philosophers in recent times. He talks about the modern political economy as a networked economy, this modern globalized economy, in which those who actually do make good and who are connected in this networked economy may do well in their life, and they can traverse boundaries and do really well. But a vast majority who get left behind, who are not a part of this networked economy, their uncertainty levels really rise up. Right? In a traditional industrialized society, you at least had a factory there. If you lost your job or if you were kicked out of your job, you could throw a stone at it. But in a networked economy, you don't really know why you've lost your job, why your particular skill has suddenly become irrelevant, why, for instance, the struggle of Dalits doesn't register at all. The culture of silence that she's talking about, because in the networked economy, only the voices of those who are networked matter. And those who are not a part of that feel alienated. And that alienation subsequently leads to a fallback on a lot of our traditional primal and primordial identities. Tribal identities, religious identities, caste-based identities, Gaurakshak identities. It is the sense of non-belonging which drives a lot of this identity and group formation, and a group formation which goes back into simple, silly, but seemingly very attractive propositions. Make America great again. An entirely, someone that Fareed Zakaria calls as a bullshit artist, that's essentially what he's called, Donald Trump, is likely to get 40% of the votes. But this has not been a new trend in the US. Remember, there was Sarah Palin prior to that. Look at what is happening in the Indian context. The uncertainties of certain segments and certain classes of people have been even further enhanced and used to form and thrust them into a certain identity group called the Hindutva. Hindutva itself becomes a fundamentalist mode of thought and of action. And with that, what we can expect as increasingly a lot of these groups form themselves into these identity groups is potential for much more increased social violence and social conflict, which is what we are actually seeing. So, along with promotion of scientific temper, if we do not promote egalitarianism and an essential unity of human beings as a necessary and an inherent component of the humanist agenda, we would have been untrue to the principles of humanism itself. Thank you.
Good evening, friends. After that extremely scholarly talk of my friend Pramod, there is very little to say on fundamentalism. He has covered it all. But I'll come from a slightly different perspective, which is what I think Babu wanted me to talk from. I'll ask you to step back over the last 100 years and examine the major changes that have happened in society world over, whether it is the freedom movement in India, the rights of women, the rights of the blacks to get out of slavery in America and acquire first legal equality and seemingly progress towards real equality, the rights of the gays and the LGBT community to get acceptance and be accepted and become part of the mainstream, or the phenomenal movement on atheism that you saw where non-believers, atheists have become mainstream and are increasingly and rapidly increasing their numbers in the world. If you see one constant reason why all these changes have happened, you will notice that it is because of a high quality public discourse that each of these causes had triggered or were based on. It is, if it were not for instance, if you just take the cause of atheism, which most of you find very dear, it was driven so largely by public discourse that what is called militant atheists like Richard Dawkins drove, that today it has become mainstream, today it has become something that's accepted and acknowledged and people find it so much easier now world over to come out of the closet and declare themselves atheists. It's something that has happened largely or probably only because of very high quality, very aggressive, very vociferous public discourse that happened, and people drove that towards it. It is a fundamental belief in the value of quality public discourse that some of us started this initiative in Hyderabad called Manthan. Several of you are part of this. Pramod, Babu and others are very active participants at Manthan, and I've had occasion to learn from all of them hugely. Manthan is formed on the premise that high quality public discourse is critically important for progress in society, for a very healthy civic life. We do two things. One is we hold talks where we call people to come and deliver talks on things that matter. And we have had people here in this hall who have delivered talks. Dr. Jayaprakash Narayan has delivered 2 talks. Chandana has delivered a talk. Babu has delivered a talk. And we have had 192, 193 talks so far over the last 11 years. But what is more important, and which is where Babu suggested that I spend some time talking about it, is we run a Facebook group for Manthan. It's a group which today has about 5,550 members as of this morning. This is a group which was started some 7-8 years back on Facebook, and by a handful of us, primarily to allow members of that group, which is all of us, to engage in public discourse, engage in discussions, engage in debates. It was based on the premise that only open discussion in a very civil environment will promote the cause of a healthy civic life, which means that is the one that will allow us to learn what someone else thinks, to accept contrarian positions in society, to be willing to look at someone else's perspective and see if there is something to learn from that, or to try to convince someone about your own position. Over the last several years, it has been a battle to fight this new creature that has come up on the internet, and that is the troll. Over the last 2-3 years, and especially since 2014, end of 2013-14, we have had this issue of handling trolls in the group. And I mean, the group is open to anyone who wants to join, and most people just request for joining the group, and we join. We accept them. We do not know who they are. Most of the people are unknown to us. But with some amount of work and effort, we have reached a stage where absolutely polite discussions happen, where there is no abuse and there is no insult. And it is this public discourse which we believe should be one of the major tools by which we can fight fundamentalism. Fundamentalism can be fought by thoughts, by ideas, by active, aggressive, great public discourse. And this public discourse has to happen across the country, in every mohalla, in every village, in every town. One way or the other, if we are able to push for high quality public discourse through the country, we would find a lot of undesirable traits that are there in public life today would come down. I would invite you to come and attend Manthan talks and see that the variety that we have there, or on the Facebook group, and see the kind of public discussion that happens. This is something that we find friends like Pramod and Babu and Chandana very actively contributing to every day. I have learned so much from Pramod, honestly, no exaggeration here. When he writes in an extremely detailed and scholarly manner on issues that come up there. And it is our belief, many of us believe that good quality public discourse, discussions, debates in public on issues that affect us, and fundamentalism is one of the biggest issues that today affects us, can alone counter these ills. So when I saw that Babu has taken up this cause, and one of the only things that Babu does is promoting this great idea of humanism, reason and atheism through very active public discourse. My compliments to you for the kind of work you do, Babu. Absolutely, you are a hero for all of us. No exaggeration, and we are proud of you for what you have done. I still remember his talk at Manthan and how well it was received. And this tour was an immense success. I've been following it on Facebook almost since you started off. So friends, the only in social media, the ills that the one animal who needs to be handled well is the troll, and that is what Babu wanted me to talk of. At Manthan, it's been easy for us. It's a closed group where we don't tolerate trolls. We just throw them out of the group. It has been very simple. We get disliked by a group, but that is okay. But the problem is, it's become a cultural issue. It's become a reality which is nationwide, and there is an army of trolls which exist on social media, and they are the ones who do not want quality public discourse to happen. All of you know that journalists, public persons, anyone who is involved in making comments will get trolled if they are not to the liking of the troll army, right? I will only give one example of what happened recently. All of you are aware of what Mr. Parrikar, the Minister of Defence, said the other day. He said that he didn't name him, but he meant Amir Khan. Amir Khan cannot make those comments, and if he makes those comments, he has to be taught a lesson. This is a statement that a Minister of Defence makes. He also said, and I don't think this was noticed adequately in that same speech, that we have a team of people who has taken care of that. Please go back and read that statement. The minister says that there is an army of people who's taken care of that, of teaching him a lesson, and that is how Snapdeal had to call off that deal with Amir Khan. Now this is an extremely dangerous proposition, to say that it is okay to teach people a lesson, it is okay to use abuse, insults and threats, and to have someone making a comment. And in fact, I find nothing wrong with Amir's comment, what he made at that time. That was a completely proper comment for him to make. It wasn't against the country, it wasn't anything. He felt something and he talked about it. If he cannot talk about it, then why have a free country and a country with rights and freedoms? No, he should be allowed to be talked about it. Our government has to be standing by anyone who makes a statement and say that he should not be trolled. On the contrary, we have an army built of trollers, an army of trolls that is built across the country, and that is let loose on people. I mean, look at Rana Ayub's book. Rana Ayub's book was published, and it was, she self-published it and put it up on Amazon for sale. 98% or 99% of people who reviewed the book on Amazon rated it 1 star. That is, it was a terrible book to read. And none of them had purchased. So these were trolls working everywhere in this country, and we need to be conscious of that, and we need to be fighting about it. There is no escape from them. We have to work with them. Keeping them aside and handling them, we need to engage in public discourse, and that is what Babu is doing. Thank you, Babu.
Important contributions today. We have limited time. We are running well past the announced schedule, and Dr. Jayaprakash Narayana is available for a limited time. Keeping that in mind, if you would like to ask questions of Pramod and Ajay, thank you for all those very undeserved nice words, but this is the time to do it.
We'll get on to the next one.
I think someone wants to ask.
JP.
You know?
Sorry, because of the light I can't see. Somebody wanted to ask.
Ajay, just about these trolls. Is it wise to engage them in a Twitter debate or simply ignore them?
It's
In social
no
media.
choice. We can't engage with them.
In social media.
We can't engage with
I
them.
think
We have
best
to
thing is
ignore
ignore them. The moment you acknowledge them and then give them the respect that they don't deserve, you're only creating a problem for yourself.
There's a problem there, Doctor. I'll tell you what. The problem is there are multiple varieties of trolls. There's one variety of troll which would disseminate misinformation. Take for instance, I'm a lawyer by training, but I've done a lot of study of archaeology, research, and argumentation. I know that how I can engage with some of the top scholars of religion. One guy comes up and says, Pramod, you are an anti-national because you refuse to acknowledge that there were horses in Mohenjo-daro. But it's a serious issue. We can dismiss it as garbage. But unfortunately, a lot of kids reading that out there are going to end up believing that what this guy has done, he was talking about this book by Jha and Raja Ram, where they've essentially photoshopped a horse onto a seal found in Mohenjo-daro. It is partly fundamentalisms effectively when they get into public discourse, they have to propagate a certain level of disinformation and a certain level of aggression in defending that, and thereby silencing a reason and a reasonable argument. Mohenjo-daro may be irrelevant for us, but it can also be about reservations. There could be somebody who will turn up and say nothing doing there, it should only be based on economic factors and not social factors. You rascal, you scum, you this, you that. So one of the ways that I mean, for instance, at the reservation, I turned around and they said, there's no more discrimination left, there's no more ill effects. 60 years is long enough. How do you deal with this? When they're making a categorical assertion that is not based on a reasoned, rational, and a reasonable argument. How do you? At some level, you end up having to go down. Unfortunately. So, for instance, about this, I had to ask this gentleman to do a thought experiment. You say that 60 years of reservations are more than enough. It should have been enough to uplift the Dalits. And he actually called them. This is what he said. They are undeserving pigs right now. I had to use history in an offensive way. Yes, sir. I would like you to think that your community is through the same kind of discriminations that Dalits have. And I specifically mentioned certain forms of discrimination. But instead of saying that you can do it against women, do it against your men. For about 150 years, and then see what you think about reservations. One of the ways you can combat, because fundamentalism is driven by this assertiveness, this absolute belief and confidence that you're completely right. And anybody who questions that is an enemy of the society, is enemy of that fellow, is enemy of Modi, is enemy of this guy, is enemy of that. You know, you should be able to tell. It has come to a point where, for instance, people are afraid to talk about Tagore, saying that nationalism carried to an extreme can also be fundamentalism. Very few people talk about it. Because there's an entire group that is devoted out there to denigrate Tagore, saying that the national anthem was originally written only for the emperor. So, I don't think not engaging with them is going to solve the problem, because they are going to mess up the airways. And over the last 1 year, I think what has happened is some of the other groups have also begun to organize themselves and have begun to heckle back. That has tamped it down a bit, but in the long run, will it lead to a proper public discourse? We don't know. I think there are serious dangers that it could slide down also, because it can start as abuse now, it can get into fisticuffs tomorrow, and later on it can be a knife or a gun. There is that danger, undoubtedly, but I can't see how we cannot engage with the misinformation that they put out.
Partly what I wanted to say, Pramod has said. Now there are 2-3 different types of trolls. One is when you are engaging in a group discussion, when you have 20 people on a thread where you are discussing. The troll comes and hijacks the discussion. The troll abuses, points out things which are irrelevant, makes insults, and the discussion is completely hijacked. Now that harms public discourse. When that happens on a large scale, on Twitter, if you have a million followers and 1,000 people troll, it doesn't matter. Twitter is not much of a medium of discourse. It's much more of a dissemination medium. But when you get into areas where discussion is possible, whether it is on social media or whether it is on public platforms, trolls can be harmful and you cannot afford to ignore them. Trolls can hijack discussion, scuttle public discourse, make it vitiated, and eventually not allow good discussion to happen. That's one. The other is trolls can threaten very badly. We have known of so many cases. People have withdrawn from social media because Ravish has withdrawn, Rajdeep had withdrawn, Barkha had withdrawn for a while. They just want to get out of it. There have been threats given to children of the people who were subjected, that they would be threatened, they would be raped, the children would be harmed. These are threats which one can't take lightly if they were addressed to. So there's a real danger. But the major danger is that they hijack public discourse across the country and across the world. This is not an Indian phenomenon, though in India it has become very predominant over the last 2 years. This is a worldwide phenomenon where trolls create havoc and disturb good public discussion.
One of the things that happens in these kinds of situations is a lot of these people think that the state is likely to be supportive. And the political process based on certain fundamentalist conceptions is therefore extremely dangerous for social stability and so on. Take what, whether we look at the formation of ISIS or we look at long back
formation of Ku Klux Klan, US, or these new Gaurakshas, or the anti-Dalit brigades, 1850s and 1860s or 1870s. Those who felt that they could impose their ideas, impose their force, and impose their rules, which are framed ad hoc, away from the normal, norm-based and rule-based rule of law that we seek. When that is encouraged by political processes, political personalities, the state itself in a way turning its eye, the dissent becomes very sharp. Today, a Parrikar saying this, what has Parrikar done? He has first and foremost suggested that for a mere statement that probably because things are getting a little uncomfortable for me here, or they look a little more disturbed in India, I would want to go abroad. People say they want to go abroad because there are not enough opportunities. People say they want to go abroad because economically they suffer. There are multiple reasons why people say they want to go abroad. For having said that, he's termed an anti-national, a criminal, essentially an immoral and a criminal person. And he says he ought to be taught a lesson. It seems like a very innocuous statement. But unfortunately, we all know what kind of methods are used by these groups in teaching a lesson. It could be a troll today. It could be somebody coming into this forum here and beating me up. Or it could be coming into your house and slaughtering you. So there are multiple ways that expression teaching a lesson holds there. That, in my opinion, is actually a statement of declaration of war against on the citizen and on this nation. When a citizen expresses a concern, a fairly measured statement, exercising his freedom of expression under Article 19. And there is nothing intrinsically wrong with what he has said. And yet, there's a threat of being taught a lesson by no less a person than a union minister. And then he doubles it down by saying, our people took care of them.
And because real harm.
Yeah.
This campaign endorsements may not.
But that is at that level. Somebody goes and complains to Mr. Arun Jaitley about this issue. And what does this man say? What does this man say? Either take it, lump it, or get out of the social. If I'm not mistaken, the executive has a responsibility, the ultimate and final responsibility under the Indian Constitution, along with the Parliament, to protect the constitutional values. For this man to turn around and say, get out. And now, as long as they held the upper hand, they were fine. So guess what happened now? The way they threatened rape, murder, and even worse, with any woman who dared to come out to the public and speak, the reverse is being given back to Ms. Smriti Irani. Tomorrow they'll say about Mr. Modi also. What these people do not understand, and organizations like RSS or morals like Zakir Naik and some of these people don't understand this. When you preach violence, when you preach this notion that individual citizens can teach you lessons, outside the scope of the law itself, you fundamentally destroyed the compact between the society and your state. The very purpose of the state is to ensure that the social compact is kept peaceful. That the dispute settlement process occurs through the institutionalized mechanisms. What these two union ministers have done is essentially to suggest that that can be destroyed, which is essentially what RSS has been preaching for the last 60 years, and a lot of Islamic fundamentalists have been preaching this. Look what has happened in the Middle East. You have an ISIS floating around there. It is partly related to Islam, partly not related to Islam. It is just pure individual fantasy of horror that they are inflicting on people. So maintaining this balance and allowing the state to resolve the disputes is an absolutely vital for the future stability of these societies and of nation states. Without that, we are dead.
Friends, I promise you that I will convince our friends here to have an evening with Pramod and Ajay with no other constraints of time. We learn so much and we get so many insights, and I hope you will agree that soon we will call you and you will spend some time with us on this.
Meanwhile, they can join Mantra.
And they can join Mantra.